Yes, baby. All right. Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're taking all the boxes and bringing a minority perspective to popular internet discourse. I'm Josh, and my pronouns are he and him, and I lead the music discussions.
I'm Tilly, my pronouns are she and her, and I lead the film discussions.
And today we're continuing the 2021 May series, a two-parter, because I really wanted to get the whole Windmill Trilogy in. So far we've covered Black Country, New Road for the first time, and Squid's Bright Green Field. And today we'll be discussing the kind of climax of the trilogy, Black Midi's Cavalcade.
Whoa, whoa.
Released in the same month as Squid, of course.
Of course.
So, I don't think there's much need for a huge prelude.
Yeah,
I feel like we've kind of
absolutely
talked a lot about the scene and its vibe.
Yeah,
What's
definitely.
your history of Black Midi?
Well, it's all on the pod, baby. We've talked about. Wait, did we talk? No, we didn't talk about
Yeah,
Schlagenheim.
you're
I'm
full of
so
shit.
silly.
You're
I'm
so full
so
of shit.
silly. I think it was because it was in
It
probably
was in the
both of our.
Christmas.
It was in our
Yeah,
Christmas wrap ups. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, so um. I am very Black Midi pilled. I think they're one of the best bands working. I I really like Black Midi. I remember when we had Gabriel on, because Gabriel's very much into Black Midi, and I remember being like, "Whoa, like I love Black Midi, but whoa, imagine being like that into Black Midi. That could never be me." And now I'm like, "Holy shit, it's me."
Interesting.
That's where I'm at with Black Midi.
Yeah, no, I do remember I went to see Black Midi live with Gabriel. It was an amazing concert,
Yeah.
and they closed out with the song "Nylon," which is an unreleased track, and went on to become Ascending Force.
Whoa!
Yeah, so lots of people at the concert hadn't heard it, and it was just this very weird waltz of an outro, and everyone just swaying. It was extremely weird, but very cool. I remember
Yeah.
Gabriel talked a lot about listening to Nylon a lot in his free time, and constantly sending me the link bro, you gotta hear this Nylon song, man. And I'm like, yeah, I'll wait till the studio version comes out. Fortunately, it did, but yeah, mega fan over there, mega fan.
Yeah, I too have seen them live. And I mean they're great. They're fantastic
Did
live. They
they play
lived up.
Nylon at your show?
They didn't play Nylon at our show. Honestly, I think they were. I think they didn't like our crowd very much. They
Was it
were
in
they.
Bristol?
It was in Bristol. They
That
came
checks out.
in. They played their song and they left. And I was
Oh
like, you
my
know
god!
what? Fair
Yeah,
enough.
I saw them in Newcastle, and at the end they played Fat Sam's Grand Slam and did a big jig and dance to it. It was amazing.
Oh, what the fuck? So yeah, I mean, I understand. I know they're southern, but I think Bristol has a reputation, and it's definitely earned. Like our student population is just terrible. Like we're just awful people, and it was definitely a lot of students there. So yeah, I don't blame them at all. They probably had a van with the engine running out back. They ran in with their guitars. It was like the beginning of Help. Oh no,
Yeah,
Hard Day's Night, the Beatles
yeah.
film.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, but it was a great gig. Like they were still amazing musicians. And I think that's something that's always stood out to me about the band is
Hmm.
that they're just what I think. Well, yeah, they're just incredibly skilled musicians, and I
Hmm.
think they're very impressive. For the the vibe that the windmill gives, the windmill impression, it's like a contrast. And I just think they're really cool. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's my
it is.
history.
It is very like I referenced just now, them dancing to Fat Sam's Grand Slam from hit musical Bugsy Malone. It was one of the least pretentious things I've seen in a concert. It was a very it was just a very fun vibe. Despite kind of I think the lofty artistic aspirations of their music, I
Yeah.
don't think they give off any kind of pretension.
It's like a separation of church and state. Like there's Black Midi the band where they would never like stunt themselves from artistic exploration out of like fears of pretense, and then
Mm.
there's Black Midi the people who were just these very, I've heard from people who like have met them and things like that, are just very chilled out, very like, you know, keep
Mm.
actually, I think the like from how they carry themselves,
Yeah.
the band is a very separate part of them. It's just like something they do, which is, I
And
mean, that's a lot of musicians, but with a band whose music is like you say, artistically grand as them, it could be easy for to think that that line would blur. And I just it doesn't seem like it does blur in
yeah, and
reality.
this is the band that gave us Dead Sheeran. So I mean, they have a sense of humor about themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, Cavalcade. Yeah, my history is similar to yours. I was a really big. I mean, we were both really big fans of Schlagerheim, back in 2019. Yeah,
God, we
2019.
were kids, we were children.
I I
God,
I do distinctly remember like walking around. I was a first year walking around campus, like listening to Doctor, you know, on full volume on my way to a lecture. Like, fuck yeah, I'm so cool. Um, and it was incredibly cool. Yeah. So yeah, both big fans of the band. I think Cavalcade. Um, it's been a really weird album for me to like internalize. There's a thing with music where it's not so much. I think, especially like in the teenage mode of listening to music, you really want to like make it your personality kind of, or identify with it in a deep way. So, for example, like in movie terms, you have like the guy who's super into Evil Dead 2. And if you really like Evil Dead 2, you make Evil Dead 2 references and you are like an Evil Dead 2 guy,
yeah,
you know? And
yeah,
I get that with like music as well. Um, and and there's kind of like a separation between like bands that you hold like really close and dear to your heart and they like just mean a lot to you, uh, and like the critically acclaimed bands who you listen to because everyone tells you to listen to them. And it's
yeah,
weird because I didn't feel that way about Schlagerheim. I felt quite like personally invested in Schlagerheim and Cavalcade, just the insane critical reception to it.
mm.
I felt this weird like distance from it. It felt like, the album that's like, oh yes, this is the Rate of Music King album. This is the true patrician music. Ah
Yeah,
yes. And
yeah,
it felt like a whole different thing to Schlagerheim. And one thing that confused me and still confuses me is how it's treated as so much better than Schlagerheim.
yeah,
We'll
yeah,
get into it. I'm sure I'm maybe a tad colder on this than you are. I still think Schlagerheim is I still kind of enjoy Schlagerheim more, if I'm
yeah.
honest. I think this is
Uh-huh.
just as good as Schlagerheim.
Yeah,
I just don't see it as the obvious, this is the better one.
that's
It's
the
just like
album.
a
Yeah.
different, in the same way that Music Pool is just like, actually, that's a bad comparison. In the same way that OK Computer and Kid A are as good as each other, just like completely different
They're
directions.
just different flavors of
Yeah.
the same from the same really good ice cream store.
And my frustration was like, why do we have to slander
Yeah.
Schlagenheim to
Yeah,
praise Cavalcade?
yeah. Let's not burn our idols too quickly. I think to answer that, I'm just gonna actually I'm gonna talk about the critical reception. 100% is very different. Kind of very. I just remember Schlagenheim was much more like music meme pages would have it in like, there were loads of Schlagenheim memes and things like that, and music meme pages would have it in their like top tens of the year or the month or whatever. Like it was talked about, well received, well loved, and people loved Black Midi after it came out. But now there is definitely the reception now of like, this is one of the meme albums of whatever opinion you have on
Hmm.
Cavalcade is kind of a meme because it's like it's so popular that it's so quickly gone through so many layers of irony where like liking it is kind of a meme, hating it is kind of a meme. Anyway, basic white girl moment. This is my album of the year so far.
Oh wow.
I would say that there's some other stuff that I'm not saying that's final. There's stuff I've already heard that could overtake it, but like I'm kind of album of the year is obviously like a big thing. But right now that's where I'm at with it. And
Yeah.
and honestly, I'm really glad you brought up comparing it to Schlagenheim because um what I found from this album is that it's just made me like Schlagenheim more. Where I listened to this because for the first time, and I like was just instantly in love. I just instantly thought it was incredible. And I had no problems with it on first listen. Uh and and that wasn't coming from a place of blind love, because I mean I was really into Black Midi. Like I thought they were really cool. But I'd always had a bit of a barrier between me and Schlagenheim. I don't know. I think I always felt like Schlagenheim is not an album that I would typically enjoy. And so it was kind of out of my comfort zone. And so as a result of that, yeah, I kind of had this feeling of whenever I was listening to it, it wasn't like a Tilly album. It was like you were kind of talking about at first. Like this was just an album that I thought was great and I really liked, but I didn't like internalize it in that way. And then realizing how much I liked Cavalcade and how much I just liked the Black Midi thing. Like I just love what they're doing as a band. I realized that Schlagenheim is just, it's not just a very strong debut, it's just another like incredibly well made album. Like there is nothing debut-ish about Schlagenheim. And yeah, I was really happy you said what you said about it being like it's just, you know, watch whichever one you prefer, because I'm exactly the same. Like I think probably I would probably say I think I like Cavalcade more, and I might think it's a little bit better, but at the end of the day, like I said, Schlagenheim is not this ugly little sibling. Like I think Schlagenheim is incredible, and yeah, I'm with you. You really should not be knocking Schlagenheim. There is so much good shit on that album, and I don't know. I don't think we would have. I don't think everyone as Black Midi fans would have the love that we do for Cavalcade without Schlagenheim as well. I think they've built their discography like really well together. I think they complement each other incredibly well. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts.
Well, this very much felt like a crossover album. I feel like the move to like more hard rock, even metal at points, and more like prog metal, emphasis on the prog. I feel like that won over a lot of people who wasn't into like the noisy, mathy, post-hardcore sound of Schlagenheim. Yeah. I'm like, post-hardcore noise rock is just right down my alley. Like I fucking love that shit. And so it was a weird like, oh yeah, this is the pretty album that people are going to compare to In Rainbows, and everyone's going to love it. And I was happy for them, and it's really good. But there was a sense, I guess, not loyalty, but like, I don't know. I felt like, I don't want to call it. No. It just a sense of like just this frustration. I think frustration that Schlagenheim is not getting its props. As I don't know. This is a very weird, I get what you're saying. Logic kind of approach to how I feel about this album.
What I'm getting from what you're saying is like this idea that people have of like, this is Black Midi now, and Schlagenheim was just like getting us to this point, and whereas actually Schlagenheim is really good, and we don't need to like discount other works of art for this one. Like they just do different things, and that's what I really like about them as projects.
Yeah, it's very much like how I feel about My Chemical Romance, where I think their first album is fucking brilliant, perfect, just amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember I just argued with someone, like, they were like, oh no, Black Parade is better. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, but like, I think there's a thing of albums that are just like presentable masterpieces. Like Black Midi is so...
I so
Black
agree
Parade
with that.
is so like presentable, whereas the first album is so like rough and raw and like off the cuff, you know. And it frustrates me sometimes. But whatever. To get onto like the actual album, yeah, it's such a weird one because I do think it's basically perfect. It just isn't. It just isn't in my heart. Like I don't really sweat. I talk a lot about sweating to music. You know when music makes you fucking like, oh, like
you just love
like
sweating to music.
Like it's like head banging, and I don't really sweat to this album. It's just an extremely pleasant listen, and I don't really. It doesn't work me up in the way that like. You know, part when he's screaming, "You will not break me," and Doctor. That shit, like that really worked. I just want to like punch my fist through walls like that. That's always so exciting, and nothing here kind of cooks me that way. It's extremely good and well composed and like well played and well written, but nothing here. To quote Phoebe Bridgers, "You missed my heart," and I don't know. I don't know why that happened.
Oh well, I think to speak to why I really loved it. For me, so I understand what people are saying of the. Well, okay. I understand what you're saying of like the presentable masterpiece, and I 100%. I think in the discourse that is kind of what is happening at the minute. For me, I would say that there is a tenderness to this album that Schlagenheim didn't have, and that tenderness doesn't work on its own. It's kind of why I said it's with Schlagenheim that Cavalcade is a masterpiece. I love how I was so taken aback when I listened to this album of songs like Marlene Dietrich and Ascending Forth, at how just like beautiful it was, and instead of feeling like an evolution in their sound, it kind of just felt like where they were at when they made this album. It felt it felt very heartful. It felt very like they really put a different side of themselves into this album, and it was really refreshing, and that refreshingness was like so exciting to me. Like I was like, oh my god, this is how I know this is one of the best bands working is I'm getting something new from this. A band whose sound was so easily like definable from their previous album have come along and almost, I think in some ways, torn up aspects of what they are. But I mean, not to say that their DNA is different. I think the band's DNA is very strong. So yeah, that's what really cracked like my enjoyment of this.
Yeah, I think I find this album to be very obtuse at points, and I find it hard to say emotionally what songs are really about. But a lot of the songs I can follow the narrative. I understand that John L. is about this horrible nationalistic, like dictator man, cult leader, who's preaching his gospel. I understand that Marlene Dietrich is about this defamed, actress. I understand that Dethroned is a very similar narrative about someone who's lost their platform and is being dishonored, if you will. Much like Horvath Rotana, being accused of things and whatnot. And I understand that Slow is kind of about waiting for some sort of oblivion to come, right? Some sort of demise. And these themes are like consistent. And I like it. And I like the scope that this album builds towards. Especially with the constant references to like minerals and rocks. Like you have diamond stuff, which is about like this person's body becoming like a husk of diamond stuff, and then you have chondrum Malacia patella, which describes the process of chronic knee pain. As if it's describing like battered, coast being smashed by waves, and describing it as, an empty shell of million diamonds singing inside on white rocks, and the white rocks of the pink mold, like skin as rocks, stuff like that. This stuff is all really cool and conceptually interesting and builds like a world, which I'm really into. I struggle to cross the wires between that and being like emotionally affected by this lyrically as much as I am musically.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think to go back to how I was emotionally struck by this, I think it was definitely more musically that I was struck. Um, Although it's not to say that the storytelling isn't a huge part of why I love this album, because I
Mm.
think all of that imagery is so like thematically cogent, but
Yeah.
it doesn't appear that way at first, and
Yeah.
that's something that I really. It's a very it's an album that's full of like idiosyncrasies. Like there's a lot of, I mean, in Black Midi fashion, there's a lot of jarring uh stylistic switch ups and things like that.
Mm.
And then realizing that all of this is actually, yeah, thematically in place
Mm.
is really impactful, because I think, yeah, like you say, there's a lot of ideas of succumbing to things. I feel like a lot of this is about like a sort of gradual decay,
Mm.
and a more just, yeah, more just like transformation. I think there's a lot, yeah, just there's a lot of ideas of that on this, and I think this the vocalist. I think
Johnny
there's
Greaves.
yeah, there is always, I always feel as though the vocalist is the protagonist of the stories
Mm.
that he's performing. Like he has this amazing storytelling ability where,
Mm.
like I say, yeah, I don't separate the songs and their stories from him. I really believe them, and all of these like concept songs are magical, like
Mm.
magical little twisted fairy tales
Yeah.
that actually all like yeah, it's like a Grimm's book of fables all tied around the idea of being twisted and distorted and deformed, and I yeah, I'm just 100% with it. Story in these little story moments all the time, and and then I mean, and then on top of that, it's so, yeah, like some of their best songwriting yet. So yeah.
Yeah. I almost feel like a lot of the songwriting here feels like art rock Joanna Newsom. Like it really
Mm,
reminds me of how she constructs like like mythical worlds to get across kind of allegory or
yeah,
metaphor.
and human like, grand, yeah,
Yeah.
fantasy stories to get across human emotions.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this album is about shame and like being punished in the eye of the other. Like you have a Hogwash and Boulder Dash, which tells about these two guys. I kind of pictured them in my head as like, uh what's the name of the two guys who look like big thumbs in Alice in Wonderland?
Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Yeah, I think of them as like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and and Boulder is really like abusive towards Hogwash, and that's and then you have a ascending forth, which is a person who has been tasked of writing this music who can't write anymore, being defamed and ashamed in the eyes of the other who is kind of like resenting him for leaning on cheap tricks, like relying on ascending forth too much
Yeah.
as a musical trope. So
Yeah.
I think it's very, yeah, like you said, very cogent, and I see the themes and they're like really interesting. Um uh but it doesn't fully connect me for whatever reason. Like,
Hmm.
I think Ascending Forth is one of my favorite tracks. I may talk about it more later on. I think it's
Hmm.
really gorgeous. Like, so much of this album is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Like Marley and Dietrich, Diamond Stuff, Ascending Forth. These are just gorgeous,
Yeah.
glittery moments on the album. But beyond like aesthetic marvel, I don't know if I can if this is stuff I feel massively connected to. So yeah, it very much reminds you of being like in English class and like reading, this is a great book from the 19th century, and you're reading, you're like, I can't say it's not a good book. It is a good book, but it's not like my book. It's not like
Yeah.
the thing I read when I feel upset, if that makes
Uh-huh.
sense.
Well, yeah, so what I would ask then is I guess this is kind of an instance for you of you think they are of same a similar level of marvelousness, shall we put
Mm.
it? It's just Schlagenheim is much more up your alley, to put it like, I guess, kind of
Yeah.
bluntly.
Yeah, I think there's a showmanship to the vocalism on Cavalcade. I don't get the vibe that he's singing from the perspective of the narrator. Of the character. He always feels like an omniscient narrator, pulling back the curtains and showing you this, just play. Like in Marley and
Yeah,
Dietrich, the way it opens with under soft lights of tape black face, our soft-spoken queen takes her place on the stage. Like that, as
yeah,
big curtains
yeah,
open. That very much feels like a narrator saying, "Our queen, Marlene Dietrich," like presenting the story.
yeah.
Whereas
I,
Shagenheim has a really like tortured vocal approach where he feels like he's embodying lots of different types of people, and it's really like visceral. And I really miss how visceral that felt. This is
uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
shimmering beauty of this album.
See, yeah, this is where we differ because I am in love with the theater of this.
Mm,
I definitely go both ways. I honestly think I like them both equally.
mm,
Like the visceral just bluntness of Schlagenheim.
mm.
But here it's so vivid is the word I would use to describe this. Like I can,
Yeah.
like it's such an image in my mind, and that's why I say I can almost see the narrator in these stories because yeah, like I can it's he paints such a wonderful picture of these scenes and these stories. Like Diamond stuff, which we'll get onto in a bit. Uh Spoilers, foreshadowing, should I say. Um is such a like it's so atmospheric and so stark and
Mm.
yeah, and contrasting to the rest of the album. Like there's so many different moments
Yeah.
on this that are so different from one another, and yet that doesn't distract from the clearness of any of them. Like
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by how they're able to tell so many different stories and have none of it feel like it's all blurred together. Like I can see all of these songs when
Mm,
I think about their names. Um
mm.
and to That's not, yeah, like I said, that's not to take away from the performances on Schlagenheim because it feels so bleak, like a character making their not even like a character making their way into the underworld, because that would, I think that isn't what Schlagenheim's doing. Schlagenheim is more just
It's lots
uh,
of anger and neuroses.
yeah, yeah, it's
It's
just
very
all,
neurotic.
it's erupting from the soul as
Yeah,
well. Like it feels very bestial almost.
yeah,
So yeah, I think yeah, it's just different strokes, that kind of thing.
yeah,
But I just love
mm,
Schlagenheim. I mean, Cavalcade's
yeah.
flair.
I think one last thing to say about like the body of the album. Like one thing I like to emphasize is that I do really enjoy this album. I'm
Mm.
just trying to explain like the feeling of like everyone's treating this as the best thing that's ever happened. And there's a dissonance between that and like, oh, this is really, really good,
Yeah,
versus like,
yeah,
this has changed how I think about music. But I
yeah,
will say like, it's an incredibly like, um, even though I think Shagham's more visceral, that I don't want to take away from how fun and like immediate the kind of playing is on tracks like John L and Hogwash and Boulder Dash. They're just incredibly insanely fun to listen to. Like they're really, really punchy tracks. And I do acknowledge that this is like an exceptionally enjoyable album to listen to. I really like enjoy this album.
good. No, yeah, no, I've always been convinced. Do not worry. But yeah,
Um, do you want to move on to favorite least favorite tracks?
I would love to. I would love to do that. Again, this is in no order of preference. I'm just picking random. Well, I'm picking my three favorites in a random order. Uh, First off is Diamond Stuff, which is probably my song of the year. I say that simply not for like drama. I just want to emphasize how
Mm,
much this is a soul song for me. Like I think this is a special thing, and I will
mm,
treasure it for a long time. I
mm,
I don't I just the first time I listened to it, I was so blown away, and
mm,
immediately I thought to myself, it's not the most insane track. It's not like the most unique sounding. Like it can probably be compared to a lot of other bands and that kind of thing. But I think it's just hmm, it's the atmosphere of that first half. That if that first half feels the most reminiscent of, I would say, like a Ductor from Schlagenheim, of yeah, like a beast lurking almost, and the lyrics of "I know I'm a husk made of diamond stuff." It's a break from the rest of the album. I don't feel like I'm being shown a stage anymore. I feel like I'm trapped in a room, and it's
Yeah.
dark, and I
Reminded
can't
me a
see
lot of
what's
the
on the other
film, the
side.
imagery in the film Annihilation.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very
The
much,
body horror of that film.
and just having that element transform so beautifully in a way that's so, I think, for this, still by this album, so unique for this band. um and then those final few minutes of just drums crashing over one another, and the kind of beautiful quietness of the guitars are really just, they're just an extra flourish amongst this wall of sounds, that I can honestly barely even begin to describe. Uh, it's just it's a beautiful song that I think that is just always summed up for me in my head as one of surprise. I just remember the first time listening to it, being so caught off guard in that second half, and instantly realizing just how much I loved it. I think I messaged you. I think I messaged you and said, "Oh boy, that diamond stuff, that sure is something special." Without wanting to spoil too many of my thoughts on the album, because I was just so excited. So yeah, that's my first favorite song.
Yeah, that's also one of my favorites. That is my favorite song on the album.
Oh,
So I'll
oh,
talk
that's
about it
really
as well.
nice.
Yeah, I remember when the album came out, I had a real issue of just like I was like, oh, I should listen to Cavalcade again. And
Just
then
literally.
I just put Diamond Stuff on loop
Yeah,
for like an hour.
yeah.
I did it. I listened to Cavalcade. um, but yeah, it's my favorite. If any of the tracks nestled their way into my heart a bit, contrary to what I said before, it would be this and the last track really.
Mm,
Um, and
yeah.
Slow is starting to really. I think about the song a lot more now.
Ooh.
But yeah, I think you know, it's really whimsical and magical in its own sort of somber way. I love how it opens up with like the anxious plucking. To me, that reminds me a lot of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. How like pure imagination starts with Wonka being like really creepy, and the music's got that
Mm,
similar like plucking. If you remember, the
yeah.
really tense.
Dun dun dun
And it
dun
reminds me a
dun.
lot of that film, the '70s one, of how it
Yeah.
balances horror and like whimsical fantasy really well. I think the song does the same thing. Um, I and when it opens up in the end, uh, it really blooms. It's really breathtaking. It reminds me a bit of moments like like Breath of the Wild, where you like step on a plateau and you see the world open up and you realize
Yeah.
the sheer scope of
Scale.
this moment. It's a really wonderful stuff. I think l- lyrically, it's really weird. The first thing that comes to mind when I listen to the lyrics of this is the scene of Sandman becoming Sandman in Spider-Man 3. Like, you know, looking down at your body and feeling very disconnected from it, and like
Uh-huh.
it becoming one with kind of alien Earth, it's like sand or diamonds. It doesn't sound pleasant what's happening in this song. I mean, he sings about like his feet being taken off by a diamond drill and being like carried across a river and dragged across kind of an anthracite
Mm,
ground, which is like a type of rock. It I do get a sense of like if I was this isn't inherently emotional to me, but if I was to try to like cross a wire with emotions that people have, I would say this does feel like a song about feeling like this is a real interpretation, but I'm sure it's not what they meant. But like feeling misshapen in your own body, feeling like
mm.
not at home inside of you, and like alienated
Yeah.
from yourself in a way.
Yeah.
There's also that sense of like an oncoming demise, right? But yeah, that's kind of what I took from it. But I think it's a really lovely track.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. I really have it. It's your favorite. Next, I will go with John L. Um, just it's just great. Like it's just a great song. I love John L so much. I know
Hmm.
it's uh I just get so like you were talking about sweating earlier. I fucking sweat when I listen to this song, man. The part where everything else breaks away and it's just
Hmm.
and you're waiting for it to come back in, and it feels like the most exciting jump scare ever when the final movement of the song comes back and it's just rolling and rolling on top of you. The song is the Boulder from Indiana Jones, just coming at you, and you're running away, but also you love the Boulder.
Yeah,
Worship the
Bodhi
Boulder.
from Hades for my Supergiant Games fans.
You need to watch. Jar Media has a new series where they play video games now, and the first game they did was Hades. Um.
Do they
Anyway,
like it?
they love it because
Nice.
Alex is a big fan of Bastion. It's one of his favorite games.
Oh, wow, fast
Um.
paced.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I will keep it brief with this one. It's probably this. It's my favorite song that I have the least to say about because I just think it's a
Mm,
fantastically thrilling song.
yeah.
Uh,
W-
and I love it.
well, it's not on my favorite list, but one thing I will say about it, from a literary standpoint, I think the word John L is extremely funny. Like, because you have the L is the Roman numeral for 50.
Yeah.
Uh, so the idea that like just there's been 49 Johns that came before who have done this exact same shit and gotten away with it. It's just incredibly funny to me.
And the very last thing I'll say about it, I think it's a fantastic opener for showing what a ride this is going to be. I think the placement of this followed immediately by Marlene Dietrich is like a
Hmm.
genius choice. Like I think that's genius because
Yeah,
well
because I
yeah
think John L sounds
you
like a
understand.
Schlagenheim song, and
Yeah,
Dietrich is like,
yeah.
oh, we're gonna move on from that now.
Yeah, and you
Mm.
understand immediately from that sequencing what they're doing with this album, and yeah,
Mm.
I think that's something I want to highlight, and I want to highlight it with John L. I just think the sequencing on this album is mwah, chef's kisses, chef's kisses. It's beautiful. Finally, again, Josh, you're gonna chime in, which is good, but Ascending Forth, and I don't
Hmm.
think this would be like on anyone's not sorry I don't think this wouldn't be on anyone's favorite songs list from this album. I think this is a universally beautiful song. I
Hmm.
oh Ascending Forth. I don't know. I Diamond Stuff is my favorite song on the album, but it raised the bar for not in terms of quality of what I think Black Midi can do, but of just what musically they can take on. There's obviously stuff like Marlene Dietrich, which is kind of equally theatrical, but Marlene Dietrich is not a 10-minute, effectively, like opera almost, that has movements and sections. It feels like almost akin to Shine On You Crazy Diamonds or something, where
Yeah.
there are so many passages that stick in my head as distinct moments. Every second of this is utilized beautifully. I love how
Hmm.
it constantly like oscillates back to that like simple beginning of everyone loves ascending forths.
Yeah.
It's such a like like a check like a checkpoint feeling. And it just every time you come back to it, you kind of realize the scope of the rest of the song that's happening around you and either side of this section.
Hmm.
It's such a incredibly well structured piece of music. And yeah, I adore what I adore that this is the final song.
Yeah.
Because it doing that as a choice, there is you are framing that as I want you to remember this. Like this is what I want you to remember from us. And it links back to what I was saying at the beginning of Black Mini are a band that forever shirk your expectations of them. I think people constantly try to like get at what Black Midi are doing and like crack the black, like, because they're a very enigmatic group of people and especially in a musical sense. And I think putting Ascending Forth as a final song is yeah, a fuck you to people who try to put Black Midi in a box, and I think it's an incredible song. um Josh, what are your thoughts on also your favorite songs, Ascending Forth?
Yeah, it's one of my favorites on the album. I like it for the same reason you like it. I think it's really sweet and beautiful and lovely. I think one thing I'll say about it is I think it's a very I find it to be a very sad and cynical ending to the album. Like this whole album's been about failing to get validation from people around you, like being kind of condemned or hated or brutalized by your environment or the people who surround you, be it deservedly or undeservedly, depending on the narrative of the song. And this Ascending Forth, everyone loves Ascending Forth. It's like this guy, the protagonist of the song, Mark, is trying desperately to think about how he can connect to people with his music, but he can't write anything. He's got writer's block, and he's relying on this like formula of like what people like and how to connect to them, and like repeating
Yeah.
to himself like a mantra. When he presents it to them, he is quote unquote unanimously they unanimously condemned his masterpiece schmaltz, impure, no heart, no taste, and that really is very, to me, there's something very sad about that. This just utter inability to connect with people and trying to basically follow like a plan of like how to talk to people, what do people like,
Yeah.
and repeating it to yourself like a mantra. So I think that dimension of the song is quite interesting.
Okay. Finally, my least favorite song is it's Hogwash and Boulder Dash. It's just the song. It's it is. I don't have much negative to say about it because it's still a good song. It's just the song that I have the least affinity for. It's the song that I like the most when it comes up on the album. I go, oh, it's this song, okay, and then I try and I listen to it and I don't skip it, but I'm not like woo Hogwash and Boulder Dash, and that's all I have to say that's negative about it. So yeah,
It's not, in defense of Hogwash and Boulder Dash, I do think it's completely bonkers and it sounds like a Looney Tunes chase sequence. It's like slapstick in the most grand and maniacal way. One thing I will ask, since you love this album, did you read through the lyrics of Hogwash and Boulder Dash? Like, can you figure out what's going on?
No,
for the life of me, can't figure out
there's
exactly
something
what's
about
happening.
the song that makes me turn my brain off to it a
Is
bit.
it?
Yeah, I just was. I'm not curious.
So I tried to piece together the narrative of the song, and what I got is as this album is set in a fictional locale of Salafisane or Salafisien, which is similar to like the Schlagenheim fictional place of the first album. Hogwash and Boulder Dash are these two people. They're described as like chickens from the pen. Again, these kind of like Humpty Dumpty type people. And they're scavenging for fish. They talk of like fish bones from like unstable rafts. So I guess they're like pillaging ghost ships, right? And then Boulder Dash begins to give up due to heat and exhaustion, and he's scolded by Hogwash. And then later on, they're on the beach throwing rocks around, keeping an eye out for quote unquote men of the law. And then Hogwash, this part I get really confused. Hogwash is distracted by an awful smell, and he asks Boulder Dash, like, where's that coming from? And then Boulder Dash, quote unquote, lucky for Boulder, his sweat escapes view, this being origin of the aromatic stew, which had led to the following bellow of few, and with his right of his nose, Hog's left hand clasps Boulder. So presumably now Hog is squeezing Boulder's nose so he can't smell the stench. Like that's how I read that bit of poetry. And then it ends with across his bare scalp as if extracts his brain and thought submissive that inside grows Boulder. So I don't understand the relationship between Hogwash and Boulder Dash. Is he like killing, Is Boulder
I don't know,
is
man.
Boulder killing Hogwash at the end of this song? What is the smell? Is it dead bodies? You know, I'm just. If I ever met Geordie Greaves, I'd be very curious as to if there's anything I can read to help me understand the narrative of this song a bit better.
It is batshit. It is batshit.
So the favorite track I have that you didn't mention is "Slow."
Great
I
song.
really love how Patella transitions into slow with like the prog metal breakdown, just fucking grinds into slow. I really love that, and I love the you talked about on Squid of how Geordie Greaves has really varied his vocal delivery on this album, and I love the kind of sinister, haunting. I guess I'll wait throughout the track. It's really chilling and really cool. My least favorite track is Dethroned. So like I can't recall in my mind what Dethroned sounds like or what Patella sounds like. I just remember it being like heavy. And it just doesn't stand out to me. And yeah, would you recommend of Cavalcade of Cavalcade?
I would give Cavalcade a very strong recommend. I have said many, many, many nice things about it. And I will continue to say more throughout the years. I adore this album.
Yeah, I'm at a decent recommend of this. I think it's like right on the cusp of a strong recommend. Like it's an ostensibly perfect album that I can't, like if I met someone at a party and said, "What's your favorite albums?" I couldn't honestly say, "I really love Cavalcade. I listen to it all the time. It's my shit." I feel like a poser. But when I sit down and listen to it and really, you know, it's really good. I really like it. It's really good. You know, in the same way that like Beethoven is good. I might not listen to Beethoven in my free time all the time, but you know, it's good. You know, I agree it's good. Anyway,
I think it's the most negative anyone's ever been while comparing something to Beethoven.
so what are we doing next week, Tilly?
Okay, so this is episode 81, correct?
Yes.
On the next episode, we'll be talking about Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and it will be the end of Robert Rodriguez's Mariachi trilogy. So tune in for that if you've been following it.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah.
Stay Black Midi Pill.
Everyone likes them already, so there's no pill.